Vladimir Putin thought he had US President Donald Trump all figured out. The Russian leader had played Trump like a fiddle. He's manipulated, lied, delayed, all in service of continuing his ill-thought invasion of Ukraine. To Putin, he was the puppet master leading Trump down any path he wanted the US president to follow. Only the strings have snapped, and Putin has lost control. Putin celebrated too early. Now the US is sending even more weapons to Ukraine as Trump grows frustrated with Putin's antics and doubles down on supporting the Russian leader's greatest enemy. On July 8th, Trump made a massive announcement. After several days of pausing military aid to Ukraine, including halting most deliveries of the vital air defense systems Ukraine needs to defend itself against Russia, Trump conducted a turnaround. The shipments are back on, and Trump believes they're now essential to bringing an end to the war. "We have to," the AP press reports Trump as saying as he announced the turnaround. "They have to be able to defend themselves. They're getting hit very hard now. We're going to send some more weapons, defensive weapons primarily." The move will come as great news for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. It'll also anger Putin. Russia's leader thought that the US pausing military aid had given him the green light to ramp up his aerial assaults against his enemy. To him, Trump was a man who he'd manipulated into giving him precisely what he wanted. Now Putin realizes he was overconfident. He'd overplayed his hand with his constant delaying tactics in ceasefire negotiations, and the US has had enough. The Pentagon has confirmed Trump's decision, AP says, with a statement noting that the shipments will resume, to ensure that the Ukrainians can defend themselves while we work to secure a lasting peace and ensure the killing stops. So peace is still on the US president's mind. But this latest decision seems to show that he realizes that peace can only come if the US shows it's willing to apply substantial pressure on Putin. It can't allow Russia's leader to gain momentum, to believe he's winning the war. If it does, Putin will only grow more confident in his belief that he has all of the leverage in any future negotiations. And just a few days ago, he certainly had that leverage. Putin's overconfidence stems from the fact that the US has engaged in something of a rollercoaster ride with Ukraine over military aid. As the New York Times reports, Ukraine's relationship with the US has often been more contentious than Zelensky would have liked. The most recent pause was the second the US has put in place in 2025, though the circumstances behind each pause have differed. Back in early March, when Trump first paused US aid to Ukraine, the decision came in the wake of a disastrous White House meeting with Zelensky. The two leaders were at each other's throats during that meeting, suggesting a fallout that would have had Putin rubbing his hands with glee. Trump responded to that meeting by pausing military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine. A few days later, both were resumed when delegates from Trump and Zelensky's cabinets met and hashed out a 30-day ceasefire deal that Putin has ultimately refused. The more recent pause is a result of the US being wary about its own missile stockpiles, making it hesitant to send any more over to Ukraine. That's particularly the case with Patriot missiles. As The Guardian reported on July 8th, the US believes it only has about 25% of the Patriot missile interceptors it needs for all of the Pentagon's military plans. Those interceptors haven't been going to Ukraine. Instead, the US has been burning through its stockpiles in the Middle East. When Iran responded to US airstrikes against its nuclear bases with a ballistic missile strike against the Al Udeid military airbase in Qatar, the US burned through nearly 30 of its Patriot missiles to defend itself. But now the situation between the US and Iran has calmed down. Perhaps that has opened the door for the US to resume its military aid to Ukraine. Whatever the reasons may be, the pausing problem seems to be over, at least for now, and US aid will soon start flowing back into Ukraine. But there's a key question to ask: what will Ukraine be getting? The answer to that question starts with the specific shipments the US paused a few days ago. AP News says that those shipments included Patriot missiles, Hellfire missiles, howitzer rounds, and guided multiple launch rocket systems, or GMLRS, along with a host of other ammunition that was grounded in the wake of America's pausing decision. All are vital. The Patriots will add to Ukraine's aerial defenses at a time when Putin is blasting the country with missiles and drones. As for the other weapons, they'll all help Ukraine conduct both defensive and offensive operations on its territory with a view to slowing down Putin's summer campaign. More specifically, July 8th brought with it news that Trump had promised to send 10 Patriot missiles to Ukraine. That may seem like big news, but it's actually 20 fewer than the 30 that were set for delivery last week before Trump made his initial decision to pause. Those missiles are still at the border between Ukraine and Poland, and it's unknown at this point if Trump intends to release the full set of 30 or if he's going to drip-feed the missiles into Ukraine as the US continues to assess its stockpile issues. But that's not all. Also on July 8th, the Wall Street Journal broke the news that Trump is considering doing something that has never happened under his administration: approve the delivery of new weapons that weren't promised to Ukraine under former President Joe Biden. The The journal says that Trump is now considering sending another full Patriot battery to Ukraine. That would be huge. While Ukraine still needs plenty more missiles to ensure the Patriot system can be useful for its defense, an extra battery provides the country with more options when it comes to its defense against Putin's aerial raids. The Wall Street Journal also says that the US is exploring the possibility of convincing some of Ukraine's other allies to send batteries from their stockpiles, potentially meaning that Ukraine's air defense situation is going to improve markedly in the coming months. That new Patriot system would add to the 3 the US has already donated, along with the 3 from Germany and the one that was delivered to Ukraine by a consortium of European countries. Together, that would give Ukraine a total of 8 Patriots. That's still not quite enough, at least according to Zelensky. He said in the past that Ukraine needs anywhere between 10 and 25 full Patriot systems to offer full coverage for his country. Still, one step closer to those numbers is a big move, especially as it highlights that the US seems to be conducting a full turnaround on its Ukraine policy. Before it was pausing weapons shipments, now it's mulling over sending more weapons than it initially planned. Still, some skeptics believe that this news doesn't signal a full turnaround in the US position on Ukraine. One of those people is Maxim Skripchenko, who is the president of a Kyiv-based research group named the Transatlantic Dialogue Center. He says, "It's not the ideal strategy we would like to see, but we need to adapt to it, and we should find a place for Ukraine in that strategy." His comments come amidst claims that Ukraine still can't count on the US to continue weapons deliveries given Trump's renewed focus on the Middle East and Pacific regions, though there is at least a reason to be cautiously optimistic given Trump's reversal on the US pause. Right now, others in Ukraine won't mind one way or another. All they care about is that the US decision comes at the perfect time. Trump alluded to this in his comments when lifting the pause, noting that Putin has been hitting Ukraine hard over the last few weeks. He's not wrong. According to the UK's permanent representative to the United Nations, Barbara Woodward, Russia's aerial assaults against Ukraine's civilians have been intensifying over the summer. The civilian death toll is at least 28, with hundreds injured, Woodward said when speaking at a UN Security Council meeting in June. She made the comments while discussing a trio of aerial assaults Russia conducted between June 11th and 17th. Attacks and civilian deaths have only continued in the nights following. These attacks are not decreasing, and they're not random. They're a part of a deliberate and intensifying campaign of violence, calculated to deepen the suffering of Ukraine's people. On top of this, Russia continues to peddle false narratives, seeking to justify their full-scale invasion of Ukraine, but there can be no justification for what they have done. Those attacks aren't slowing down. On July 4th, mere hours after Trump had a phone call with Putin, Russia was at it again. In a record-breaking assault, Russia fired 539 drones and 11 missiles at Ukraine, killing 1 person and injuring 26 in a strike that targeted practically every district in Kyiv, according to the BBC. Ukraine says that 72 of Russia's drones managed to penetrate Ukraine's air defenses, with the 539 that Putin sent breaking the record of 537 Russia launched on June 28th. What we have here is a Russian leader who was so confident in his ability to play Trump that he felt he could attack Ukraine with impunity. And in truth, Putin has thought this for a while. As he delayed and wrangled with the US over a potential ceasefire, Putin has been increasing the aerial pressure on Ukraine throughout 2025. Radio Free Europe revealed that in figures it shared from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, or ACLED, on July 5th. The ACLED looked at Russia's air and drone strikes between January 2024 and June 27, 2025. According to the figures, the only time that Russia sent more than 2,000 of these weapons into Ukraine in 2024 was in September, when it fired 2,075 missiles and drones, causing 452 deaths in the process. It surpassed that 2,000 barrier 4 times in 2025, with Russia's missile and drone strikes intensifying constantly since December 2024. In December, Russia sent 1,269 drones and missiles, causing 216 deaths, the ACLED says. In January, the number of missiles and drones rose to 1,718, with 217 deaths. In February, it was 1,846 missiles and drones with 286 deaths, followed by March, which saw Putin blow through the 2,000 barrier to fire 2,190 missiles and drones, causing 393 deaths. It's only gotten worse since then. April brought with it 2,277 missiles and drones, leading to 440 people dying in Ukraine. In May, the number of projectiles fired was 2,436, causing 333 deaths. There was a slight slowdown in June, with 2,110 missiles and drones launched up to June 27th, causing 335 deaths. Still, that was more than Ukraine faced in May 2024, showcasing that Putin is determined to keep up his intensive aerial campaign. These numbers showcase a pattern. Russia is relying on its airstrikes to cause severe damage to Ukraine, killing hundreds of people in the process. And it's not like Putin intends to slow down. The July 4th strike we mentioned earlier showcases that, as Russia broke its own record and launched a quarter of the missiles and drones it needs to launch to break the 2,000 barrier for the 5th consecutive month in 2025. All of this throws the US decision to lift the pause on military aid to Ukraine into a new context. Putin's aerial assaults have been intensifying, not just during that pause, but during all of 2025. Zelensky's requests for more Patriots represent his plea to the Western world to help him defend his country against Russia's aerial barrages. Trump's turnaround isn't a full solution to Zelensky's problem, however, it represents a vital first step that may lead to Ukraine receiving more air defenses in the future. It's the future to which we now turn our attention, as we ask what all of this means for Ukraine and its war with Russia. The first thing is for certain, Trump is growing increasingly frustrated with Putin. Russia's leader, who for months has thought of himself as a puppet master manipulating Trump, has instead discovered that all of his machinations have done little more than anger the US president. The Guardian reported as much on July 9th, noting that Trump recently told a group of his top officials during a televised meeting, "We get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, if you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless." CNN says that Trump's frustration has been growing for months. It points out that the US president was saying very different things about Putin back in February, when Trump claimed, "I believe he wants peace. I mean, I know him very well. Yeah, I think he wants peace. I think he would tell me if he didn't. I trust him on this subject." Trump has gone from trust to bull in 5 months. That happened because Putin kept playing his games, thinking that he had the US president under his thumb. Trump has woken up to what Putin is really about. His comments about Putin being nice but meaningless reveal that. And with that growing frustration comes a growing inclination to help Ukraine. After all, if Zelensky continues his straight talking with Trump, along with his diplomatic efforts to negotiate a ceasefire, Trump's anger at Putin will only grow. That anger could develop into even more aid in the future, while solidifying the relationship between Ukraine and the US once again. There are certainly some in Ukraine who believe the US decision to resume military aid is a sign of the political winds changing. They include Irina Gerashenko, who is a member of Ukraine's parliament. Taking to Facebook in the wake of Trump's aid resumption announcement, she proclaimed, "This is a signal of political change in Washington. The increasing intensity of Russian attacks and increased pressure from allies in Europe, including Germany and France, are forcing the White House to shift approaches. This is also the result of the influence of Congress, where Republicans and Democrats are more often making joint calls for active assistance to Ukraine. That's why I don't get tired of repeating the importance of activating dialogue with Congress." Gerashenko sees increasing unity inside the US as it relates to the Ukraine issue, which she believes can only mean good things for her country. She also sees opportunity, as she explains in the post. For Ukraine, this is a critical window of opportunity that needs to be used to strengthen defense capability and resume a strategic dialogue with the United States. Communication by 5 to 6 managers has failed. The negotiating teams need to be reinforced by professional diplomats who do not cause Washington's frustration. Gerashenko makes a good point here, but the relationship between the US and Ukraine now appears to be on the upswing. Maintenance of that relationship should be on Zelensky's mind, she argues. Ukraine can't afford to allow Trump to grow as frustrated with its actions as he is growing with Putin. Ukraine needs to go full steam ahead on the diplomatic front to show the US that it's willing to work alongside it. Zelensky's straight talking about Ukraine's situation and his willingness to engage in ceasefire discussions are both important. Now he has to be careful not to do anything to anger Trump while allowing the US president to grow ever angrier at Putin. There's also the issue of tariffs to consider. Trump has issued tariffs throughout his second stint as president to place pressure on other countries, especially China. However, Russia has been practically immune from these tariffs so far. While some may see this as a sign that Trump is sympathetic to Putin, the reality is that there's barely any trade between the US and Russia on which to levy tariffs. In 2024, the Office of the United States Trade Representative said there was only $3.5 billion of trade between the two countries, with imports from Russia declining by 34.2% during the year. Direct tariffs against Russia aren't going to hurt all that much, but indirect tariffs, that's a different story. Trump has already suggested that he may consider additional sanctions against Russia in the wake of his decision to resume aid to Ukraine. "I'm looking at it," is what he told reporters when quizzed on the issue, according to The Guardian, adding that any action the US takes would come as a little surprise to Putin. That action may end up being the bipartisan bill currently being pushed by US Senator Lindsey Graham. That bill calls for indirect tariffs levied against any nation that does business with Russia, with Graham suggesting that tariffs could go as high as 500%. The idea here is simple. Given that the US trade with Russia is so minuscule, at least in the context of the sheer economic weight of both countries, the US can instead hit Russia where it hurts by placing pressure on Russia's customers. A 500% tariff on those customers would do that, forcing all of them to think long and hard about whether it's worth buying from Putin. Graham certainly seems to think now is the time to add even more pressure onto Putin's shoulders. In the wake of Trump's aid decision, Graham took to X to make the case. Ukraine has said yes to ceasefires and to any and all meeting requests while Putin continues to defy peace efforts, Graham declared. It's now time to put more tools in President Trump's toolbox in order to end the war. I expect the Senate will move the bipartisan Russian sanctions bill that would allow tariffs and sanctions to be placed on the countries who prop up Putin's war machine and do not help Ukraine. The bill will have a presidential waiver to give President Trump maximum leverage. This bill has 85 co-sponsors and counting. It's time to end this bloodbath. Could accepting this tariff proposal be Trump's next step? We can only wait and see. For now, Ukraine will be delighted with the developments over the last few days. US missiles are once again going to be streaming into the country, allowing it to mount a stronger defense against Putin's forces. Granted, Ukraine could always use more, but it will also be happy to see how frustrated Trump has become with Putin, as that frustration could lead to more decisions that benefit Ukraine in the future. Putin celebrated too early. He thought he had Trump wrapped around his finger, but what he really had was a snake that uncoiled itself and bit Russia's leader hard as he continued his attempts to take Ukraine. And as all of this is happening, Russia's troops are falling like dominoes on the Ukraine battlefield. As modern weapons come streaming into Ukraine, Russia's soldiers are being killed in their thousands thanks to World War I-era tactics Ukraine is using against them. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more up-to-date commentary on the latest developments in the Ukraine war. And thank you, as always, for watching.